computer. And we are recording. Welcome. This is
Thank
the
you.
launch of a series of conversations with women about self-care. I recently did a survey in September and asked women what they wanted most in their lives. And over 50% of the 85 plus women that responded shared that they wanted more self-care. So today, my first conversation is with Ann Sullivan on the West Coast. So this is East Coast meets West Coast. Ann has been practicing life coach for over a decade and has also spent the last several years working in the field of addiction with the focus on women of all ages who struggle with issues of compulsion and trauma around attachment and sexuality. Ann's multidisciplinary training in the arts, spirituality, psychology, self-help, and the body have given her a holistic perspective and wide range of skills and tools. Ann has been blessed to train with and work with the best and carries with her a strong lineage of mentorship. She practices at a residential treatment center and remotely with clients to transform their lives and fall in love with themselves. Ann is passionate about her work, so prepare to get excited today. Thank you so much for joining me, Ann. Are you ready to dive in?
Yeah, good to be here, Beth. Thank you.
Okay, first question. What does self-care mean to you?
Well, and I mean, I loved your questions. I just kind of want to put that out there. And I think that this is, self-care is something that's out there in social media land, in the realm of personal development. And I think for each person, it is unique. So when you say, what does it mean to me? I think that's a really important question to ask people. What does it mean to you? And when I was thinking about that, Beth, I thought of two things. I thought there's sort of preventative self-care, and there is kind of responsive self-care. And to me, I mean, when I just get down to the bare bones, self-care is caring for myself. So taking responsibility for myself, taking responsibility for my health and well-being, and taking responsibility for my reaction to life and how I care for myself through what's happening. So there's, the things that I do in order to make sure that I show up to life in the best way I can. And then there's the ways that I deal with life. So I guess in some respects, some healthy coping mechanisms. And, that was something that, I think despite the best intentions of the adults around me, I came into adulthood not really knowing a lot about. So I think, there's, it can be quite a journey of discovery for what self-care is for you. So, speaking to the women who are joining us, just making sure that you acknowledge too that your self-care at this moment is the absolute best you can do. And then, we're always learning. Yeah.
Well, I love that you mentioned the inner part for the self-care toward yourself, but also the recognizing in the reacting how you're responding to the world, and because that is also part of self-care. So it's quite nice of bringing in both that balance of what's happening to me and how do I care for myself and how do I care for myself. So great ways. What are the top 3 ways that you love to take care of yourself?
So, and again, I love this question. So, when I was thinking about it, 3 things came up for me, and they kind of encompass, they're sort of umbrellas for all the things that I do in that. So number 1 for me is reaching out. So something that I've found for my self-care is that I need to have a community of people that I can reach out to and get honest with. So I have friends, I have colleagues, I have support people, therapists, coaches, body workers, people that I can reach out to, and I can share my experience. And that can help me to vent, to discharge energy. If I've got energy, it helps me get perspective. It helps me feel supported and seen. I know when I'm being self-reliant and isolated, usually there's something going on. So that's kind of one of my first lines of self-care is to reach out. One of the other things I do is pampering. So, doing things that in somatic experiencing, which is the trauma method that I work in, Peter Levine talks about orienting to pleasure. And that can be quite triggering for people at first, because we're so used to keeping our eye on the threat, so used to keeping our eye on what's going wrong. And so pampering for me is about starting to shift my perspective and shift my energy to doing something that's really nice for myself, and also about aligning with my own empowerment and my own like wellness and wholeness. So things like having baths, things like, taking a long time to lotion, things like going for a really luxurious walk in the woods, getting my nails done, having a beautiful tea with a friend, right? So things that are very pampering to me, even a spa weekend with the girls. So, and I think it's really important to also say that I think that comes with a kind of a sense of privilege. And I don't think by any means that we have to have tons of money to pamper, that we can pamper ourselves in really kind of humble and easy, simple ways. So I want to kind of offer that idea of orienting to pleasure to your participants, because I think it starts us thinking about what feels good. And then the other thing that I noticed that is self-care for me is learning. So trying new things, reading a new book on meditation, listening to Marianne Williamson's Aphrodite learning or training, right? Doing some kind of learning. And I noticed that for me, that's about attending to my own personal development, my own personal growth. So, I love learning and I love teaching. So that's a big part of self-care for me, is setting aside that time to learn about ways that I can take responsibility for myself and I can open my mind to new things. So those are kind of three areas or three ways I like to take care of myself. Yeah. And within that are all the little things I love to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a little bit of a spin. How do you recognize when you're not taking care of yourself?
Absolutely. And this is so important, starting to pay attention to the ways in which we get out of balance. Mm-hmm. For me, I'm very body-based. So those are always, my body is always a good measuring stick for where I'm at. So I get body signals, aches, pains. I start to get sick. I can manifest my stress in different areas of my body. I have some kind of areas that tend to, stress tends to manifest more. So if I'm connected, if I'm paying attention to my body, it lets me know when I'm out of balance. It lets me know, where I'm feeling stressed or what I'm feeling stressed about. The other thing that happens for me is I get busy. And that's my old coping strategy, is to get really busy and try to take care of it all, have control. And so, I'll notice when I can't slow down. That's usually when I'm out of balance. I need some self-care. Is getting into those old coping strategies. If I'm, binging on Netflix, then I know I need some care, some self-care. And there's a difference there. Sometimes it's fine for me to have a little marathon on Netflix, and I'm okay with that. But if I'm doing it, if I'm doing it a lot, then I'll notice I'm numbing as opposed to really caring. How I'm eating, what I'm craving, those things are all signals to me about what's going on. Because for me, I've been through quite the healing journey. And so I have some old coping mechanisms or coping strategies that I really pay attention for, which kind of brings us to the next question about recovery.
Yeah. Well, I just want to highlight what you said, because these are some great tips. Like the being busy for being busy's sake is a great indication just to stop. Right. And just check in, and sometimes it isn't with the body that we recognize the signals of not being in self-care. It's with that mind, that busy mind of, that mind trap of going around and around and around in circles. So I love that you bring that up, because that I know that we're not alone in having that.
Yeah. Absolutely not. And I think too, it's really important to remember that if we are really stressed out and overwhelmed, we're actually going to disconnect from our bodies.
Yes.
So that, that connection is going to be offline, and it's going to be all reaction and survival. And if I'm in survival, I usually don't recognize it internally. It's more of sort of what's happening, what I'm bumping up against in the world, because there is such a disconnect going on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I love that, because that is really does bring in to the next question. What are some ways that you recover from being disconnected?
And what I want to say to you, Beth, is that I think this is probably the most important question you have in here, because I think what it does is it identifies the fact that we aren't perfect, that life is set up to throw us off balance, and that if we are out there living our purpose and responding to life, then, you know, and creating the life that we want, we're learning and growing. So we're going to stretch ourselves. And, you know, for me, this hits home personally, because for me, recovery is a huge part of my healing journey. So for me, I came to all of this kind of work through my own, the oven is preheated, through
Hey,
my own, through my own, through my own sickness. So, you know, for me, I suffered from addiction. And addiction, when we get well from addiction, we enter the world of recovery. And for me, that has a really positive connotation to it, the word recovery, because it's about engaging in a program of life to better ourselves, to be of service, to be in balance, to take responsibility for ourselves. So that's a really important word for me. And it can be as small as I need to, you know, get a really good night's sleep, have a bath, and, you know, take a day where I'm just walking in the woods and hanging out with my partner. That can be recovery for me from a long, busy week. Or all the way to, okay, I've gotten really out of balance, or there's something, you know, a wound that's coming up, or I've had some kind of experience in life that has been wounding or traumatic that I need to recover from. And this is important, because I think that as women especially, we can feel guilty about really taking time to do the things we need to do to take care of ourselves. And that we can feel really guilty when we hit an obstacle, we come up against a wall, a struggle, a healing crisis, or if, despite all of our best intentions, we find ourselves in a situation that we've created that is very abusive, or is making us sick, or just really challenging us. You know, one of the things that I want to talk about and offer to your participants is this idea of, we can't really grow without the challenge. That, you know, if we're bypassing the challenge, we're just bypassing. If we really want to grow, we're going to have to go through pain, we're going to have to go through challenge, we're going to stretch ourselves, we're going to make mistakes, we're going to do all these things that we tend to, especially as women, feel super guilty about. And so, you know, recovery is, I think, one of the most fundamental aspects of self-care, because it's about being able to acknowledge, you know what, I'm past my threshold, I need to recover, I need some time, I need some space, and to use my tools. That said, I think if we're constantly in a cycle of crash, recover, we've got something else going on.
yeah,
We're in a cycle. So I do think that, you know, this idea of self-care is about having, you know, a lifestyle and an understanding of what balance is for you and your, in a holistic way, but also, you know, knowing that we're going to go outside of that threshold and we're going to stretch our window of tolerance, and that's a good thing. So we're going to have times of recovery. You've actually caught me in a time of recovery. So I entered this world of working as an inpatient counselor in a treatment center, and it was intense, and the hours were long, and I was surrounded by people who were very sick, and it triggered a lot of my own trauma, and, you know, was dysregulating, but it was important for me to do. And so, you know, I did it knowing that I could self-care myself through it, and then knowing that I would also have some time that I would take eventually for recovery. And that's where I am, in a cabin on a lake for the winter, just recovering.
yeah, yeah. I love that, because I can feel the space that you've stepped into in this recovery from the treatment center.
Yeah.
So, and it's delightful.
Yeah.
Last question. What is one thing that you would like to share for the sake of someone that's learning about self-care for themselves?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I think because I never ever keep it simple, I think there's two things I want to share with your women. And one is I think the sort of initial um, exploration or journey of
Mm.
really taking responsibility for self-care is so juicy. And if that's where you are, I am so excited for you. And I think it's all about trying things and being creative and playing and having fun and doing the things that, you know, your inner child wants to do, doing the things that your inner goddess wants to do, and just, you know, utilizing all the resources that are out there, you know, just going to the library and going to the self-help section and just like picking a book that calls to you, or, you know, going to your local woo-woo store and listening to some meditations while you like hold crystals, you know, like whatever it is for you.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and everyone's different, right? Going on a trip and sitting in all the beautiful churches in, you know, in the world, right? Like, I think it's so about following your heart and about listening to yourself. So the other thing that I want to say is that I really believe that there is an element of responding to life, that, you know, I think we can fall into this pitfall in personal development around, I am responsible for everything. And I think we are, but I think that there's a paradox. And I think that we are responsible, but we are co-creating with life.
Mm-hmm.
And we're co-creating with, you know, the world around us. And so sometimes I've found in my journey, and I can share this with the women who are listening and watching today, is that life has plans. And that, you know, what I imagine as, you know, here's my intention, here's my vision, and I do a lot of work around that, that life will bring my manifestation to me in a way I never expected. And so, you know, there I am equipped with all my self-care and ready to go, and life will come in and give me a challenge. And it's about responding and changing. And so, you know, when I started working at this center, I was, you know, I self-identified self-care queen, you know, living a life that was very balanced, very flow, a lot of time for myself and self-care, and suddenly that was gone. And now it was about making sure that I was attending to my needs. So, you know, doing a lot less, upping, you know, body work, upping massage, acupuncture, therapy, making sure that I was taking care of and you know, discharging and integrating and processing all that I was taking in. So, you know, whereas, you know, before I could have a lot of friends and be very social, I had to really limit that social time and really focus on just myself. So I think, you know, balance sometimes is about readjustment and response. So I think that that's a really important thing. And I think this idea of what we resist persists is really about when we are resisting what's happening, it just makes it worse. When we can surrender to something, even though it may be challenging, that immediately opens us up to having more energy, because we're using less to kind of fight, resist the change. So I think, you know, what I'm really trying to talk about is not just is being careful about having an idea of, this is my self-care, this is what I have to do to be healthy and whole and well and balanced, because that's rigid.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, you know, I think it's always about growing and learning, and always about integrating kind of new ways and being able to be flexible with life and dance with life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So once you have that kind of foundation of what you know works for you, then I think you're able to kind of adjust it.
Yeah. Well, and thank you. You know, one of the things that you have woven so beautifully into answering all of these questions is the word responding.
Mm-hmm.
And when we respond, we are immediately in a better place, being open to self-care as opposed to reacting. Because when we're reacting to a situation, to a challenge, to something in life, then we're like, we're shutting that door. And being responsive is being open. And that's the beginning, right? In so many cases, it's just the beginning, is just to respond and recognize.
And I think what I also want to communicate to your listeners is that being really compassionate to the reactionary self, because
Yes.
it's always coming from defending and protecting your vulnerability.
Of course.
And that, what you're talking about, Beth, is so important, that, response immediately brings us into contact with ourselves. What's happening, what's going on, getting curious, and that, makes us more open. But I think what we can't talk about the gloriousness of self-care without talking about the wounds and the pain and the hurt that maybe stops us from that, gets us out of balance, and that there's nothing to be ashamed of about that. And that's why there's people like you and people like me. And that's why I say it takes a village. It takes a village to care for this woman. That self-care is not something I do alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Anne. This has been amazing. I've really appreciated this. Thank you very much to those that are tuning in and listening. This is going on Facebook and Instagram and a few other places. And I would love for you to share in the threads maybe the second question, which is what are some of the ways that you like to take care of yourself? Let's really open this up, because this seems to be the thing that women want most in their lives. So I'm going to be back in a couple of days with another interview with another amazing woman. And take care, and we will see you in a few days. Thank you.
Bye.